Well, I'm guessing the cabin fever is setting in for all of you. So luckily we have this winter weather edition of Culturally Appropriate to keep you occupied for the next hour. So today we are going to talk about the holiday release of the movie Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet. Next, we are going to talk to the Assistant State Naturalist for the state of Tennessee's parks system, Holly Taylor, about some of the winter events that you can go to at your local state park. I know a lot of us are really wanting to get out of the house now and dreaming of warmer days. So there are plenty of opportunities to get us through. And last, we're going to do our weekly film rundown. No telling whether or not theaters are going to be open. It's been dicey all week, but if they are, these are our picks for what you can watch over the next little bit if you can get out of the house. So let's go ahead and get started. This morning in the Pamphleteer, I published my belated review of the new film Wonka by director Paul King, who made Paddington and Paddington 2. This was a movie that has really been kind of the underdog of the holiday season. A lot of people may know that the box office this year was a little dicey because of the fact that there wasn't a major release like Avatar or Spider-Man No Way Home that brought in hundreds of millions of dollars and served multiple demographics. But Wonka has been kind of this quiet blockbuster. It's made really admirable grosses. It opened pretty solidly. It's on its way to a couple $100 million. And from all accounts, it's a crowd pleaser. I was a little bit skeptical going into this movie just because of the fact that it's another iteration of a franchise that is probably unnecessary in our climate, especially in the wake of more original movies like Barbie or Oppenheimer, and the success that they have had. But I also am a big fan of the director and his Paddington movies as well. For those of you that have seen Paddington, it's probably a pleasant surprise for you. Wonka's a very similar movie in that regard. There's also been a lot of online discourse about Paddington 2 being the best reviewed film in the history of cinema. It's kind of neck and neck right now with Citizen Kane on Rotten Tomatoes for the highest number of positive reviews. And I think Citizen Kane just finally took the crown back after one review. So Paul King is a director who really does know what he's doing. And I think more important than that, he's a director that really does tap into the universality of cinema. He understands the medium and the way that it can serve as mass art and really affect people. And he isn't afraid to go for the emotions, especially in children's cinema. So Wonka's a great movie. It's a prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the 1971 movie starring Gene Wilder. But it also has to sort of live in the shadow of Tim Burton's remake, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which came out in 2005. And somehow the movie pulls it off. I'm not really quite sure how, but it manages to be its own film while also giving subtle nods to Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Um, Whenever we think about Willy Wonka, and I recently revisited both of the movies sort of in preparation for this particular piece and the segment on the show. Thinking about the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it's really a dark movie, as most of the best children's entertainment really is. I mean, if you think back to a movie like Home Alone or The Addams Family from the early 90s, a lot of the movies that we millennials grew up on. There's always this dark undercurrent. And, we think about Wonka as this kind of recluse, this figure that has really been destroyed because of the cynicism of his age. What Paul King's movie does is take us back to the origins of Wonka. And we see, in this case anyway, that he's the daughter of a gypsy. There's a sense of magic that happens in this film as well. And it's really unexplained, which a lot of critics, including the New Yorker's Richard Brody, really didn't like, that Wonka's able to just harness this magic. But what makes it really interesting is it doesn't really go into this. It's not concerned in that kind of world building to, make this a franchise that we're going to have multiple movies in and sell all kinds of products. The magic is fueled by his belief in imagination, by his belief in his ambition and by his desire to bring his product, his chocolate, and the craft of his chocolate to the public. So this Wonka is very idealistic. We don't really know what happened to Wonka in the interim, whenever he became sort of the reclusive Gene Wilder or Johnny Depp figure. But this movie's not really concerned with that. The basic plot of the film is he journeys to some unnamed, vaguely European city, and it's run by a chocolate cartel led by Slugworth, who those of you who have seen the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory know as the imagined villain of that movie. In this case, Slugworth is a real person. And one of the left field things I didn't expect this movie to do, but it does amazingly, is really get into our kind of current moment where bureaucracy is cherished. So the chocolate cartel essentially runs the city. It's got the church on the payroll. It's got the cops on the payroll. The police chief, who you see here, played by Key and Peele's Keegan-Michael Key, does an amazing turn as the corrupt police chief who just keeps gaining weight every single scene. We also have lower level bureaucrats who try to entrap idealistic people coming into the city with the fine print and basically making them indentured servants by offering them a room and then giving them a bunch of extra extraneous fees. So in a lot of ways, this is a movie about how we live now. And it also advocates for, imagination and wonder never being stifled by this bureaucratic world. Wonka is able to overcome corruption and bureaucracy just by the sheer will of his desire to create. And I think that's something that is an incredible, admirable thing for a movie to do. The movie is also very interesting in the way that it brings people together from all walks of life. Something that I found really amazing about the movie is, in this day and age, it's not afraid to have a black protagonist or a black antagonist as the main force that's fighting against Wonka. Where most movies today would never deign to do something like that, because apparently in modern cinema, especially blockbusters, we have to pander to the status quo. We have to pander to identity politics. And this movie doesn't do that. It might be because Paul King is British and not American, even though he's making a Hollywood movie with an American star like Timothée Chalamet. I'll also say that the movie's performances are just absolutely stunning. Chalamet is just weird enough to get across that level of Gene Wilder, and he's just cool enough to kind of give us a little bit of kernel of what we see in the Johnny Depp remake. The supporting cast is also amazing. I've already mentioned Keegan-Michael Key and the wonderful performance that he turns in. And Rowan Atkinson is kind of the surprise MVP of this movie. He plays a corrupt bishop, and he's really kind of leaning into the darker undercurrents of Mr. Bean. So if you haven't had a chance to go see Wonka, if you didn't watch it during the holiday season, I definitely think this is a movie that merits being seen on a big screen. And it's a film that I am happy to recommend. In the future, we were a little bit delayed because of the snow and because of some releases that we wanted to talk about, but I'll be releasing my top 10 of 2023 in conjunction with the Oscar nominations. So we're going to see where all of these movies shake out, but I'll be making recommendations for the best of the year. And I'm sure Wonka will find its place or mention in that article somewhere. So Wonka, check it out if you haven't already. You will not be disappointed. It's a crowd pleaser you can take the entire family to, which is all too rare in this day and age. So for those of you who are kind of tired of sitting around and maybe don't necessarily want to go to a movie, state parks have a lot going on over the next week. I will say I live very close to Edgar Evans State Park, which is where our assistant state naturalist Holly Taylor works, and her husband Mark Taylor is a park ranger there. So I've been on a lot of these winter hikes and these winter events, and it's not something I think a lot of people think about when they think about state parks. These are places we go in the summer and the spring and go on our walks or go see foliage in autumn, but there's a very dynamic calendar, as you can see here, of various events. One of the events that I highly recommend that everybody experiences, even if they can't this year, is the Wolf Moon Hike, which Edgar Evans does. It's about an hour outside of Nashville. But if you look at the calendar here, which is available on the state park's website, various other state parks are also offering full moon hikes. So there's just something magical about going out in the cold of January and seeing state parks lit by the moon. There's no leaves to diffuse the light. So you actually can walk around state parks in the full moonlight and experience nature. And it's this eerie, wonderful experience. So I'm going to defer to my pre-recorded interview with Holly Taylor, and she's going to talk about a lot of what our state parks have to offer in winter and for the rest of the year. So we'll go ahead and get that interview started now. Well, I am here today with the assistant state naturalist for Tennessee State Parks, Holly Taylor, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some of the events that our state parks have to offer in the winter before the spring. I know some people are probably itching to get out, maybe after this week, not necessarily outside, but there's still a lot going on and a lot of nature to enjoy. So Holly, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell me a little bit about some of the events that are going on in January? I think a lot of people might not think of January as the time to enjoy our state's wonderful parks, but I know that there's a lineup of stuff coming up, even starting next week once we recover from the snowstorm. So what do the parks have in store for us?
So, yeah, there are things going on all year long at Tennessee state parks, and that includes the coldest months of the year. And some of the highlights, of course, are if you, there's a lot of hikes coming up because we've got the first full moon of the month that's coming up on the 25th, 26th. And so there's actually several what we call wolf moon hikes. This is the wolf moon. So there's a lot of those that are taking place. One is taking place close to where I live at Edgar Evans State Park, which is going to be led by Ranger Mark Taylor. And I probably will be helping with that one as well, since he's my husband. And that one will be about a 2.5-mile hike round trip. And if the moon is out, if it's clear and with no leaves on the trees, we could usually hike the trail just by the light of the moon without any kind of light. And it's a really cool experience. So I definitely recommend that. And there's also other parks. I think there's 6 other parks that are doing full moon hikes if Edgar Evans isn't close to where you live. There's one happening at Stone Door, which is over at South Cumberland State Park, close to Beersheba Springs. That's a really cool experience because that overlook has one of the biggest and best views in Tennessee state parks. And so you have a really great view of the surrounding sky. It's a great place to see the stars, especially. And in addition to hikes, if you're not interested in hiking, there's also other things going on indoors. Over at Cordell Hall Birthplace State Park, they actually do a lot of pioneer skills programs. I know they do a lot of camp cooking. There's one coming up that I think you can learn how to make biscuits and gravy over a fire. There's needle felting going on over at that park as well, different crafts. And as you get closer to Valentine's Day, there's also some Valentine's programs coming up. And one, if you're interested in going a little further out of Middle Tennessee, go to Red Clay State Park. They're going to be having a couples fry bread class. Let's see what else. You can actually find all of these if you go to tnstateparks.com and you click on activities and events, the top tab, and then that'll show you a pull down menu, and you click on upcoming events, and you can filter those by region if you want to and see everything that's going on. So I'm scrolling through that calendar right now. If you're closer to East Tennessee, Roan Mountain State Park is having a tomahawk toss on January 27th. There's at Teofuller State Park in West Tennessee, close to Memphis. You can learn about birds, take a birding walk out there. Timms Forest State Park is actually having a polar plunge. So there's a real variety of things that are going on all over state parks, even just the month of January and February. So there's really no excuse to sit around indoors if you don't want to.
Great. Yeah. And so how do the parks typically come up with this programming? Because I would imagine winter programming might be a little more difficult than spring, summer, whenever people sort of think of this is the time that I want to go out to a state park.
It's actually part of our job requirement. That's one of the things in Tennessee state parks, our state park system, especially even with our park rangers and all of our park staff, interpretive staff, we really pushed engaging with the public in a meaningful way. And that's a really big part of what we do. We all receive training for that. And some parks do have a quota, I guess a program quota that they meet. I don't know if they do that anymore. But you know, it's great to encourage people to get out and experience, you know, nature and all these different seasons, because I mean, every season offers something unique. And yeah, it's amazing the variety of programs that people come up with, and some of them are really creative and a lot of fun. Most of them are also free, I should add. There are a few that you do have to pay for. It's usually not much, but usually they're free. They have some that are specifically for children as well, if you're interested in that. And then there are programs available for educators that meet actually curriculum requirements as well. So a lot of options.
Great. And I noticed that for the most part, you all like it if people do go to the website, which we will be putting up, and RSVP, just so you know how big your group is going to be. Is that right?
Yes. So the one at Edgar Evans State Park does have a limit to it. Not all of the hikes have limits, especially the ones that fall around big events. We have statewide hikes, like the first hikes. Almost every state park has a first day hike. There's also a Black Friday or day after Thanksgiving hike that's done statewide. Typically, those don't have a limit set to them. And for some of those, we've actually had some pretty high numbers of attendees. I think the record is Beeman Shelby Forest State Park, just north of Memphis. I think they had like 700 people show up for. I think that was after Thanksgiving Day hike. Typically, it's not that many people, but usually for those hikes, you're just walking.
So I know a lot of us are familiar with park rangers just going to the wealth of state parks that we have in Tennessee, but your job is a little bit more distinct than that. So could you tell us what the assistant state naturalist does on a day-to-day basis in the park system?
Sure. So my overarching job description could be described as being an ambassador for the natural resources found in Tennessee. And what that looks like is that can be engaging with the public, doing interpretive programs, holding classes, leading hikes. And also that is extended internally within our department, helping to train other employees and better engaging with the public about our natural resources, or even just coming to their park and acting as a consultant, helping them identify species on their park or best ways to manage to protect those species. I do some writing as well. I write for the Tennessee Conservationist publication, which I highly recommend, very good one. And I also am working on various documents that are also going to be for the field on our SharePoint page, mostly just publishing resources just to help better support the field, our field staff and their efforts when it comes to protecting and preserving we call our natural resources, which really is just our plants and animals and geological features and those kinds of things.
And I noticed also that you travel around the state a lot to
Yes.
various parks, so you're not just home at Edgar Evans. So what are some of your favorite parks that Tennesseans who have wanted to go and they know they're there and maybe they just haven't gotten the chance to go out in various regions? Like, what are some of the personal highlights for you around the state of places to visit? Because I know we have dozens of state parks. I think a lot more than maybe people realize.
Okay, so we have 61, I think now. Let me think about it, because we just added 4. It was 57, and we added 4 more state parks. So we have a lot of state parks. And as far as choosing a favorite, I will say that, no matter where you are in Tennessee, you're at least within an hour's drive of a state park, no matter where you are. And some places are, they're more densely packed with state parks than others, and they're incredibly diverse. I mean, each park offers something different. As far as picking favorites, that's tough. One has to be Edgar Evans, just because that's like my home park, and I lived there and worked there for a long time. Over in East Tennessee, Roan Mountain State Park is absolutely beautiful. You're right there in the Blue Ridge Mountains, along the Appalachian Trail. Of course, in June, they have the Rhododendron Festival when the Catawba rhododendrons are in bloom. And then in Middle Tennessee, Old Stone Fort State Archaeological Park. We have 2 what we call archaeological parks. One of them is Old Stone Fort, which is in Manchester, which is a really cool, has a lot of ancient history there, beautiful trail that goes along the Little Duck River and the Duck River. Absolutely gorgeous, fascinating history. And then Pinson Mounds State Archaeological Park, which is in Jackson, Tennessee, another really incredible ancient site. There's a lot more sites than that. Those are the 2 official state archaeological parks. Oh, what are other parks? Savage Gulf State Park and South Cumberland State Park. They just got split into 2. They used to be one state park. Some of the most incredible scenery in Tennessee state parks is there. If you are a hiker and a backcountry camper and backpacker, that is your park. You have just over 50 miles of trails there. Meeman Shelby Forest State Park is beautiful. That's north of Memphis. Reelfoot Lake is a must-see as well. That's our largest natural lake in the whole state. An incredible, unique, and rare ecosystem that we have left in the state. Paris Landing State Park is another favorite of mine. That's on the north end of the Tennessee River in West Tennessee, just on the Kentucky line. Beautiful, beautiful views of the water there. And, you know, several of our parks actually have pretty luxurious accommodations, and that's one of them. We have parks that we call resort parks, and that one falls into that category. So you have a beautiful lodge overlooking the largest expanse of water in Tennessee, really nice accommodations there, and a restaurant. So there's really something for everybody, and that just barely scratches the surface. There's so many great state parks out there, and you can literally find, you know, there's something for everyone, every one of our state parks for sure.
Yeah, so I know a lot of us are looking forward to March, April, May, whenever the weather improves, and as you mentioned, the Rhododendron Festival that's coming up and some of these other events. What are you most looking forward to in terms of programming throughout the state as we get into the warmer months that we're all wishing we were in the middle of right now?
It's not far away. Probably wildflowers. Tennessee is an excellent place to see wildflowers because the state is so long. It covers all these different ecoregions. You have this this incredible biodiversity across the state. So you don't have to travel far. For instance, you can travel from Cookeville, you know, just to Monterey and be in a totally different ecosystem because you've gone up in elevation and the geology has changed. And so it's an incredible state to see wildflowers. So wildflowers for sure. There's a lot of great state parks to see them. And then of course, birds, the birds start arriving, all of our migrating breeding birds, a great time to get out and bird watch. So it is tough to beat spring when it comes to, you know, an exciting season because you finally get out of winter and everything starts to grow and bloom. And so yeah, I do look forward to the wildflowers and the birds the most, I think, and fireflies. Once the first fireflies start to light up, you know that the warmer days are quickly approaching. So
yeah, so the fireflies are typically in the Great Smoky Mountains region is one of the major places for that, right? Which is not a state park as much as it is a national park, but I know there's like a whole lottery or something involved in actually going to see those, right?
there is, and the ones that most everyone are going to see that are pretty much only found in the Blue Ridge Mountains, mostly at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So and it's not just restricted to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That's mostly where people go. That's who has the lottery for those. But around Elkmont, even, you know, any area that's sort of at the foothills, you can get the species, and they're a synchronous firefly. Can't think of the scientific name. I think it's Photinus carolinus. That's important necessarily, but it's a species that actually is synchronous. And what will happen is, and I haven't seen them yet. This is on my bucket list, but I haven't actually seen these yet. But what they do is they'll all light up, and then they all stop at the same time, and it goes dark, and then they light up again. And another species that people are going up there to see is the blue ghost firefly, which is one that's very unique because it actually doesn't, it has a continuous glow. They hover about 3 feet off the ground, a sort of a bluish glow. Now, what's interesting about that is that those are not restricted to that region, even though people are entering lotteries to see them. Every year we discover more populations. They're found as far west as Memphis. You just have to know when and where to look for them. But there are at least 30 species of fireflies in the state. So no matter where you are, and any season during the warm season, usually starting as early as, you know, late March, early April, you're going to start seeing fireflies up until fall. So most people don't realize that we've got at least 30 species. So
yeah, see, I'd always thought it was just in the Great Smoky Mountains, and you had to do the lottery, and it was June, and that was it, and it was, you know, years long of a lottery or something like that. So really good to know that you can probably sneak in and see some synchronous fireflies in other places as well. So Holly, how, if someone is interested in pursuing a job like yours as a state naturalist, you know, not necessarily all the enforcement that comes along with being a park ranger. What's that career path like? How did you end up in this job and in this position?
Well, definitely if you have a love of the great outdoors, an interest in nature, that's a good start. You will need at least a bachelor's in a related field. I got mine in conservation biology. You can get some in wildlife or even recreation related. Biology is good though if you're pursuing more of the naturalist route. And then Tennessee State Parks actually offers a seasonal interpretive ranger program as an internship, summer internship, and you can apply for that by the time you're in your junior year of college, I think, or sophomore. And you will get it there. There's at least one position per every state park. Some have multiple positions, and you can apply for that. And that's a good way to get your foot in the door. As far as jobs, so our park rangers, in case your audience doesn't know, they are commissioned law enforcement. So you do have, if you want to become a park ranger, you do have to go through the academy to get commissioned. But there are more non-commissioned positions becoming open now. If you're interested in only doing, say, the interpretive programming or the naturalist side of things, there are more opportunities like that coming up.
That's great. Yeah, and I think a lot of people might not know that distinction.
Right.
I mean, I did not know that whenever I thought about park rangers, that like this is has to go through the academy and everything like that. So besides the geography, what do you think separates the state of Tennessee from the other states in the region in terms of the parks and the parks program? Because we have a lot of tourists coming in to our state parks.
I mean, I'm biased, but I think what separates us is we're the best park system. And there is a nationwide contest every year, and we actually won it consistently year after year. I think they had to change the requirements or something so that we stopped winning. But I think what sets us apart more than anything is our focus on engaging with the public and with our interpretive programming. The seasonal interpretive ranger program is a big distinction. I don't know of too many other parks that have something similar to that. And just the real focus on engaging the public with the long-term goal of creating stewards, because we obviously need to pay it forward. We need people that are going to also pay it forward, because without the support of the public, our state parks can't really exist as they are. And so we definitely need, you're not going to protect what you don't love. And so I think that the focus on that has made us a very successful park system. And I think also our state government has been very, very kind to us of late. We invest a lot of money in our state parks, and we're seeing a good return on that as well with our new infrastructures, and that's bringing more people in. So I think we're just the best.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of people, you're talking about the lodging opportunities. It was something I'd never thought about until I got to know you, that people can plan anniversary trips, go to the state park, probably get a lot better return on their investment than going to some resort that's private, that's around the Smokies or around one of these other geographical areas, and be right there in the center of nature. And they do offer a lot of those amenities that I think are just outstanding as well. So yeah, the Wolf Moon hike is going to be, it's a Thursday, January 25th, around 7 o'clock is when it starts.
Yes.
At Edgar Evans, but it starts at comparable times at other parks throughout the state, as I understand it. So
yeah, so let's see. Bledsoe Creek State Park, for instance, they're having one. Theirs starts at 5 p.m. And then go to Edgar Evans here. I think Edgar Evans starts at 7 p.m. So that one will be a little bit longer because it's a longer trail. But like I said, there's at least 6 parks. Rocky Fork State Park, that one's really far away, but that's up in the sort of the north, sort of southeast corner of Tennessee. And fun fact, Rocky Fork State Park is one of our newer state parks in East Tennessee. They have the highest point in all of our Tennessee state parks. And Seven Islands State Birding Park, which is just east of Knoxville, is also having a full moon guided hike. Old Stone Fort that I mentioned earlier, the archaeological park in Manchester is having one. So there's, I mean, if you just like scroll the calendar, there's an amazing amount of things that are going on during this time frame. But if you're interested in a full moon hike, it's definitely something. If you're in decent hiking shape, you should try it at least once. I mean, you've done it.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a really unique experience. So, and even just, it's amazing. You know, whenever we lead night hikes, it doesn't even matter if it's January or not. How many people have an experience just being out in nature at night, and it's a very different experience. It really awakens your senses, especially if it's, what was it, like 14 degrees when you hiked with us that one night.
It was bad for sure.
It
It was
was
an
cold.
amazing experience, but I mean, I was quadruple bundled that night. So
Yeah, so bundle up for sure.
yeah, I mean, it's something I'd highly recommend. I'm going to be going, and Edgar Evans is about 75 minutes outside of Nashville, right? So for those of our
It's
viewers that
within
live
an
in the
it's within an hour. Yeah,
oh,
I
is
think
it great?
yeah, it's I think it's, I don't remember mileage wise, but I mean it's like it's just under or right at an hour from Nashville.
Oh, perfect. So that is again next Thursday. If you all are ready to break out from the snow coma that we've been in, we have a lot to offer the state parks. So Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. And I mean, I'm sure I will see you soon since I'll probably be going on this hike next week. So have a great weekend and please stay warm.
All right, thank you so much for having me. You stay warm as well.
I will try. And that was Assistant State Naturalist Holly Taylor. Again, we've got links up to the event calendar for the year for all of the state parks. So, as Holly said, there's a state park within an hour's drive of just about everybody in Tennessee. So, make sure to take advantage of that if any of these events sound like they are of interest to you. So, we're going to conclude as always with our weekly film rundown. And we're kind of in a dry period of the year. But with the Oscar nominations coming out next week, a lot of last year's awards contenders are finally making their national expansions. And one of those is Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest, which is a film that I have been excited about since its Cannes premiere. So, Zone of Interest is based on one of Martin Amis's last novels. It won the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival this year. And it's a little bit different take on the Holocaust. Some of you may be familiar with Hannah Arendt's idea of the banality of evil, in which evil acts and atrocities are not necessarily committed by supervillains like Hitler, but by those that go about their lives every day just doing the work that they were told to do and following orders. And this is a movie that really taps into that philosophical take on events like the Holocaust. So it focuses on a family that lives a stone's throw from Auschwitz at the end of World War II as the Nazi regime is crumbling. So this is really a domestic drama take on the Holocaust. If you've seen Jonathan Glazer's other films, like one of the masterpieces of contemporary cinema, Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson, which came about 10 years ago, you know that he is in some ways a minimalist filmmaker. These movies don't have a lot of dialogue. They're really a lot about atmosphere, and they're very philosophical films in the slow cinema tradition, even whenever he's working in a genre like sci-fi. I'd also recommend Glazer's Birth, starring Nicole Kidman. It's another dynamic film. Zone of Interest is the number one on my list this week. I am toying with the idea of fighting the snow to go see it. I should be having a review of it at some point in the next couple weeks in the Pamphleteer. So that is my pick for the week. But there's also a lot of other movies that have some space right now. One of the nice things about not having releases inundate us is that a lot of films that are smaller have time to get good word of mouth going. And one of these is the movie Freud's Last Session, starring Anthony Hopkins as Sigmund Freud and Matthew Good as C.S. Lewis. And this film is essentially a fictitious meeting 2 days after World War II breaks out between Freud and Lewis. I wouldn't say it's a faith-based film necessarily, but it is a film that is very dialogue heavy, and we get to see Anthony Hopkins choose scenery as Freud. Matthew Good is also an incredibly underrated actor who's really been around for about 15 years, and I feel like has never gotten the due that his talent deserves. So this movie's gotten kind of polarizing reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of critics seem to love it. A lot of critics seem to hate it. I know all of our Anglophiles in the audience are going to be interested in seeing it, and I plan to make some time for it as well. Another film that I am very excited to see this weekend is ISS, International Space Station. It stars West Side Story's Ariana DeBose and really kind of MVP character actors, Chris Messina and John Gallagher Jr., who are both in Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom. Chris Messina was probably most recently seen in the Stephen King adaptation, The Boogeyman. But essentially what happens in this movie, and we're just sort of inundated with world wars this week. It's a bleak time of year, apparently, but World War III breaks out on Earth, and the Russians and the Americans on the International Space Station are both given orders to commandeer the station in the interest of each of the nation's security. And this is a movie about the drama that unfolds in the aftermath of that. It's gotten very solid reviews. Ariana DeBose is an actress that's been on the watch since he won an Oscar for West Side Story. So this might be one of those movies that gets a lot of build up and word of mouth. Another film that I'm very excited to see this weekend is the horror movie Founders Day. I don't think this movie is going to be anywhere near as good as Eli Roth's masterpiece, Thanksgiving, and I don't use those terms lightly. If you read my essay on that film, I think it's one of the greatest films released over the past year, but it still looks really good. It's a nice throwback to these movies that were happening in the 80s, these slasher films that were loosely based on holidays. So during a mayoral race in a small town that's about to celebrate its Heritage Week, Founders Day, obviously, um, a mass killer goes on a rampage, and it's up to the younger residents to stop them. The movie has gotten pretty solid reviews for a film of its kind. You know, horror movies don't necessarily get great reviews. It certainly has been reviewed much better than the recent film Night Swim from Blumhouse. But at the same time, it's probably not going to be one for the books, even though it's going to be a nice diversion during the week. So those are the four main releases that are coming out. The Belcourt also has a lot of programming. Back in the beginning of January, they started this Winter Classics series, and they've been showing movies like The Shining and 101 Dalmatians. But this week, they're kind of at their pinnacle. They're showing Disney's Frozen, which is kind of the perfect movie for this time. But they're also showing Runaway Train with Eric Roberts, which is kind of a lost canon action classic that came out in the 1980s, and it's about two escaped convicts who board a runaway train in Alaska. Kind of the perfect Saturday afternoon matinee, which is when it's showing this weekend. You also see some of the past programming here. Cool Runnings played. We got Dr. Zhivago coming up. Fargo played a couple of weeks ago. So they've done a really great job with this series. And I would highly recommend, if you've got nothing else to do, going out and seeing one of them. There's also the ongoing Sunday Supper series the Belcourt is doing in celebration of the new French movie The Taste of Things with Juliette Binoche. So every Sunday they're showing a film that is about food. Coming up soon is Babette's Feast, one of the masterpieces of world cinema. This week we have another masterpiece of world cinema. Then that is My Dinner with Andre, starring Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. And if you have heard of this movie before, you know that it has a reputation as being an incredibly compelling film that is just about two people talking. It is basically a 2-hour dialogue session. Don't let that not sell you on this movie. It's incredibly well performed, and it's one of the most profound films that has ever come out of world cinema. So this one will be a great opportunity on Sunday. The Belcourt also has the Giallo film Torso playing tonight at midnight, as long as the weather holds. This is a movie that was very influential on the slasher film genre whenever it came out. There's a whole history of Italian giallo films out of the 70s by directors like Mario Bava and Dario Argento, and how they've influenced all of the movies that we consider horror classics today. And this is one that's really not seen as much, so it's great that we have an asset like the Belcourt in town that allows some of this stuff to thrive and find new audiences. And with that brings us to the end of the weekly film rundown and the show. So whatever you get up to this weekend, as you're caught up in the existential ruminations of being stuck in your home during the cold weather, give it some thought. There's a lot of opportunities around, so just not waste this time. That's very introspective and can prove pretty profound. So with that, have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week.